Hi, this is George at paintreproductions.com. So today we're going to be working on our Vermeer reproduction of the girl reading a letter at the open window. We're actually into the detailing phase, and when I say detailing, I'm not just talking about picking up tiny little areas and detailing. It's like the finished blocking. Everything's all refined. We're not going to make any major modifications. This is pretty much the painting, so now it's a matter of how far you want to take it as a painter. I like to take it I don't go for exact. I like it to where I'm comfortable and where I enjoy it, so I know when I frame it, it's going to look nice in my collection and stuff like that. Some painters out there, and I've talked to a lot of people that, they like to go as far as they can go with the reproduction and take their time. You can sit on this painting for another month. Mine is, I get it to a point where I'm kind of comfortable and I enjoy it and I understand how to technique, and then I'm ready to start another one and things like that. And I also don't like to keep really going back to a painting once I think it's done. So once I initial it or sign it or put my after Vermeer and then I put my name on there, once I'm done with that, I really don't go back to them. So I'm kind of happy with them at the end. I don't obsess about it, but I don't cut it short. If it needs more work, I've gotten as far as on some reproductions that I get to a point, especially when I was doing Rembrandt, that it was beyond my ability. It was going to take time. So I sat on it for over a year before I went to the next. So I started to feel real comfortable at working at a certain kind of flesh tones and a certain kind of brush strokes. So I do get obsessive about that, but for Vermeers and stuff, as long as you have fun and you take your time with it. So what we're going to do right now is I'm going to give the next part, I'm going to do another glaze shot on the back painting. Now, as we talked about earlier, this back painting wasn't there till a couple of years ago. It was discovered that someone painted over it. And it's really important to the meaning of the painting. And the importance is this is Cupid with his bow and arrow and everything like that. This is signifying love lost. Now the letter looks like she's reading a love letter. Without this in the background, she could be reading a letter, she could be looking at her water bill. So this really does have a lot of significance in the painting, and it was put there for a reason. Vermeer's used this painting in background painting, in backgrounds of some of his other paintings too. And he's changed it around where it wasn't as much of a Cupid and things, so it's kind of cool. So if you do some research into Vermeer, you'll find this painting in other different places. And if you actually do some research, you can find this painting yourself if you wanted to reproduce it yourself. But what I want to do is I want to get that a little bit more of an age. And the reason why I want to get a little bit more of an age, not just because it's like this, because when we look here, like if you're looking at the iPad over here on the right, you could see all that cracking and all that. I'm not trying to simulate that. You can see where the glaze is worn off. But he did kind of, if we really look at it, you could even see some blue in the sky back there, which is what I was going for in here. So we'll put a little blue in there. And just a little bit, so we could see a little bit of his wing in there. So I don't know, and we'll probably never know, because it was painted over it and they're restoring it back, how much of this actually showed. But I can say that in some of the other paintings that have aged a lot better than this one, his background stuff was done on purposely blurred out, or kind of the details kind of left out, not because he didn't want to take away from the subject too. He wanted this to be an afterthought as a decoration in the back. And right now it's competing. So I want to blend it back out a little bit more with that goldish. So probably one more glaze, a little bit lighter on the flesh tones, some a little darker, a little bit blues in here, but it's just little bits of paint. So you see me do little bits. And then from that, we have to start looking at the background here, this background wall. And then we're going to have to work on bringing out some of the fabric on here. So there's a bunch of little things to do as we wrap up this painting. But, it's part of the process too, is that you leave it alone because it's completely dry right now. I haven't touched it for 2 weeks. So now I can really add some glaze. And one of the things you want to be really careful of, if you start applying glaze and your painting is still a little wet, it's going to take some of that paint off and you're going to see the underpainting where you don't want to see it, or you're going to see the canvas. It'll take that underpainting or initial sketch or the grisaille, it'll take it right off. Because inside most of your glazes, and when you mix glaze, you're adding some kind of a turpentine, something to dilute the glaze. So it's adding something there that's going to take it away. So you have to be really careful that when you glaze between steps, it dries, but it should dry fast anyway because your glazing is very thin, transparent layers. So we'll see that as we do that now. I'm going to take a brown, I'm going to mix a kind of golden hue, like a golden kind of brown, and then I'm going to apply it to the whole thing on here. And then looking at the picture itself, I'm going to apply black in certain areas, and you'll see, I'll kind of just work that little bit of glaze in, work that little bit of glaze in. Now, I'm doing this prior to doing the curtains. The curtains are a more forward object. So I want to make sure that these actually stand out. So these curtains are going to get 2 or 3 more shots of glaze to really make them stand out. This is the most forward things we're looking at in the picture. So when I do it here, the tassels in the bottom and stuff, all that's going to be coming out, coming forward. So in turn, so when I go around and I'm working on this, I'm going to be working on this. I'm going to be working this area, touch up a little bit more here. But this stuff that's really in the foreground, very last. That's like your highlights and your details and stuff. But for right now, I'm going to mix up some glazing. As far as my colors on here, it's the same palette I've been using. I have my colors you can see right in the description down there, but I'm also adding into here is I use Winsor Newton glazing and glazing medium. I like it. It's fine. I've tried mixing my own glaze. There's a bunch of recipes out there you can do. You try, but I've kind of liked this one. I use it for blending paints too, so I kind of like it, and I like to stay simple. So that's just, I think I paid like $2 for this, and it's lasted me almost a year. So it's perfect. So I'm going to mix some of that into a plastic cup, and you'll see me pulling from there and adding it into there. So what happens is if you're using this and say you accidentally take some of this out instead of the linseed and you thin your paint down and you're painting, you're not going to hurt anything. And that's important right there. So it's not going to do any damage. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to just put a little bit in here. It does give off a lot of odor. So once you add it in there, you kind of want to shut it. It's like varnish. And you don't need a lot. I'm only going to be, for now on, I'm just going to be using little bits of paint. I would rather mix paint as I go than mix way too much, especially when I'm on the end with glazing. So the last thing too is I got my paper towels. Now for brushes, primarily blending and soft brushes. So for soft brushes, I mean like nice soft tip brushes, nothing really hard, no hog's hair brushes. We're not doing any kind of like, you know, impressionism where we're going to let these soft brushes do a lot of the blending and a lot of the work. And we're going to be doing a lot of dabbing or scumbling. So scumbling, like I was talking about earlier, if you're not familiar with scumbling, to me, scumbling is just when you've got a wet glaze, it's a wet on wet. Think of like a Bob Ross, big scumbling thing. He worked wet in wet paint. So when I have a wet glaze in here, I'll use little bits of dabs and I'll blend that into the glaze. That's what I'm referring to scumbling. So scumbling brushes could be anything, as you know, they're just small detail. You'll scumble with a detail brush, you can scumble with a huge brush. It doesn't really matter, but for this, I'm just going to be basically using this. Maybe to apply to glaze, I'll use something like this. But I'm not going real big. I'm not going to use a big old house brush or anything on this. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. So when we're mixing these initial colors, I'm going to be mixing a little bit of brown, a little bit of yellow, a little bit of white. Get that golden hue. Be very careful when you're glazing because white is not translucent. So basically, it's really hard to glaze with white, but it's very easy to scumble with white. So when you're mixing your gold, it's okay to take brown and yellow, mix them together, use your glaze, and then if you have to get it lighter, just scumble it in with a little bit of white. If you try and mix the exact color with the white on there and you try and scumble it and you use the glaze, you're going to have a hard time because it only works with translucent colors. And translucent colors, when you think of translucent, think of colors like watercolors. You know, think of those colors that mix and run. And the reason is when you take a translucent and you put a blue, and you put a nice blue glaze down here and it dries and you put a little translucent yellow over top of it, you start to get a greenish tint is what we're going for. You could really manipulate colors, and the masters knew this. The masters knew they didn't need 500 or 600 different kinds of colors on a palette to mix. They can work with limited palettes and use a glazing technique to do stuff that it almost would think it was impossible to get that brighter red or that brighter blue or blend that into the background without having to paint all this different detail to add shadow and all that does different things, which is really great. It goes a long way to helping improve us as an artist. So I'm going to go ahead and get this started. I'm going to mix this brown, yellow in there, and I'm going to see glaze, and then you'll see me slowly add some of the colors as I scumble them in, and we're going to try and wrap up this area in here and this area up here today. Again, my name's George. If you haven't subscribed, if you can hit that subscribe button in the bottom right corner, it really helps. If you like the video and you hit that like, that's great. If you don't like it, you know, that's fine. You can put in there what you don't like, or if you something else you want to see, or you want me to see some other kind of different style or something. I'm always working on something different. Just let me know. Again, I want to thank you for watching. I hope you enjoy. Okay, so one of the key things we want to make sure is that we don't have any kind of streaks or anything like that. So I'll take a soft brush and I'm really lightly just kind of blending everything in together. And if I have to apply some more, I'll apply some more. But I don't want to see any kind of like streaks or anything like that. We want it to just blend in nice. And as you can see, it kind of just pulls everything in really nice together. So it kind of like just really gives it a nice little aging, like a antiquing process you can do on here is what I'm trying to say. So that pulls it in like that. Now we can kind of scumble in, but before I really want to scumble in too much, I want to do the same thing, but I want to do a little black around the outside of the picture frame. So doing the same thing, I'm pulling some black down in here, and I'll even mix it into the brown a little bit. It doesn't matter. It's not going to hurt it. I'm just going to kind of thin that out. And again, it's if you know it's pretty close, especially if you're using a glass palette, when you push it across like this and you can see through it, that's how you know you're getting pretty close on there. You really don't want any kind of buildup. So I'm going to pull that down through here. And I use a ton of black glaze when I'm going over gazelles and going over all different kinds of stuff. So I'm always applying black glaze, the backgrounds and stuff, especially if you're doing like Caravaggio's, Rembrandt's and stuff like that, Vermeer. You can really blend stuff and really make stuff, especially when you're doing like a curso, like you're just trying to blend stuff in the back and you just want it to just disappear. I mean, the black glaze just does great, especially really thin colors, and then go over with white, black glaze again. You know, different things, especially like Da Vinci's and things like that. You have a lot of fun with black glaze. Okay, so I've got the black glaze going around the frame. It gave it a little bit of an embedding right there. So I'm looking now. What I'm looking for is anywhere else that might be really dark in here, since I've got the black glaze out. And you could go as far as even taking a look at her down here. See if there's any kind of where you got to darken in here, but it looks pretty good in there. Now, of course, I see some different colors in this frame, but all that really is somewhere where the glaze is worn off. So I've got this in there. If you got to apply a little heavy, that's fine. Put some down through here. Okay, so I'm going to clean this brush up. We're not going to be using this big one anymore. Now for the scumbling part. I'm going to grab my support. So I got my support stick right here, which keeps me from touching that, but I can still get in there a little bit and really look at what I need to look at in here. And looking up here, I want to blend in some blues just right into here. And what you can do is you blend it in. If it's too blue, you grab some of that black glaze or that golden brown glaze. So I could take some of this black glaze right here and just kind of blend it in a little bit. And I'm using the side of the brush on an angle. Just kind of push it up and pull it around. And just get it to go right into that glaze. And I'm not even trying to work it too much. Oops. A lot of projects going on. Yeah, it's just up in here. And there's a little more over here. And you can either go back to that big brush and just kind of pull it in. Really light, just kind of dabbing it in. working into that glaze. And that's what I'm going for right there. Nothing really too much, just because again, it's in the background, so we want it to stay in the background. Now, as far as the flesh tone goes, there's just a couple little areas that are really bright, or not bright, but a lot brighter than they are on here. So we'll mix a little flesh tone, which is pretty simple. We'll just take a little bit of brown. Just keeps going forward up here. A little bit of red, pinkish color. A little bit of pink, but if you need a little brown, you put a little more brown in. A little that white, a little bit lighter. Now we have a good transition right there, and this is what I was talking about earlier. So I want to go to the brightest places, and I want to just add just a little bit. And my blending brush is going to be pretty small too. So I mean, I've got some really tiny little brushes right here. So I got a little detail brush and an even smaller detail brush. So I'm going to take the smallest detail brush, and I'm going to grab some of that flesh tone, just a little bit on there. I'm just going to dab it where I want it. So I want a little bit here, a little bit here, a little bit on the tip of the nose, there, some on the cheek, fold of the mouth, and then on the chin. Okay, and then just a little bit on the Rembrandt shadow, which is the little triangle in the dark right there. Then I'm going to take my other brush and just kind of blend it in. And I'm letting that brush tip do the blending, the little tiny circular strokes to blend it into the glaze and pull it down. It's a lot easier to add a little more white than it is to try and take it away. So it's ever so little bit of paint. And that's all right there. You don't really have to add a lot. If you want to take a little bit of that red for the cheeks, you can put a little tiny dot of red. A little dot of red there, a little here, maybe a little down here in the mouth. Take that little bit of red, and you see you don't need a lot. Okay, and then we'll maybe take a little bit of that off. So take a little bit of that off. Oh. There, there. And we can dull it down. We can always dull it with a little gray too. That's fine, right here. There we go. Okay, now there's a little bit of highlight of this yellow, this brownish white. I don't want to take the flesh color. I just want to get a really nice light brown. Very thin line. And we're just going to keep doing this right down the whole flesh tone area along the side and the arms. Okay, so we went ahead and glazed it. I took a minute to draw that straight line down through there. Just a nice quick straight line with a really small detail brush. I touched up some of the brown, some of the blue. I've got the black in the frame. There's a little bit of areas in there probably use a little bit more work, but I'm pretty happy with it. I may take, just little tiny things like blend out some of these lines and stuff like that, but it's just little stuff you do as you go to wrap it up. But for right now, I'm pretty happy with this part. So what I want to do for the next part is I want to work on I want to work on this area right up through here, the curtain right there. And it's going to take a little bit of work to find out that really that bright orange right there. So I'm going to get down in there and we're going to glaze that one more time just in this area right here and see if we can touch up this orange and this orangish color and get this a little more brighter. And then we'll probably be working around the windowsill and we're getting pretty close. Okay, so I mixed a nice light color orange on there. I'm taking a look over here. I had to adjust my light a little bit. That happens a lot of times, the light with the glare. So you got to kind of work it off so add it from the side so you don't get that glare on there. But keep in mind on this curtain right here, I'm actually a little bit over. So I'm like oh, right over here. Kind of messing with the iPad just to get it right where I'm at so I got an idea. Okay, so I mixed up some really light orange. Now by eye, it doesn't look right. So I used the color checker on there to make sure. So the color checker I use is just the same one where I have the video on how you can make one. I've been using it for, I don't know, 10, 15 years, I guess, or more like 10 years. Same one I've made. Just put dab a little color on there. I look at it through the iPad and make sure it's the color I want. So I've got the kind of color I want right there for the highlights. I've got the reddish kind of color for the glaze. Now I'm looking at the glaze here and I actually don't think I need to glaze it again. I think we're pretty close on there. I just need to do the highlights on it. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to start in the brightest area, which is right through here. And I'm going to do just like before, except I don't have any glaze. So what I'm going to do is mix my glaze just like I'm mixing it with linseed oil. So I'm going to do it nice and thin with some glaze on a highlight brush, or a detail brush. I'm going to pull it out like this. And I'm just going to kind of work the paint in. And then we'll need a little bit redder, add a little more red to it. So I'm just kind of highlighting right now. And this little bit of work right here goes a long way in a finished part of the painting. And what you can even do is once you're done doing this, you can get the highlights right and get everything right, so all the shadowing's right. And you can even get one thin layer of red glaze over the whole thing. and just a little bit of black in there, and that'll really tie it up nice. And I'll have to take a look at it once it's all in place to see if if I want to add that extra step in there. But for right now, I'm not unhappy with it. But it's little tiny strokes, and then you're just doing a little bit of blend. You're doing a little bit of. You take that paint, and you take the tip of your brush, just kind of blend it in. Try not to get into that dark too much. Because if you get into that dark, it's okay because you can actually get in there and then put a little bit of black glaze in there, and it'll clean it right up. But if you're really careful and you just kind of keep blending out and blending out, I guess the best way to explain it is if you were doing it on pencil. I used to have fun especially when I was a kid, and I was doing drawings. I would shade and blend shade in every little corner. I'd shade it out a little more. And I used to have fun. I'd sit there and see how much I can actually blend it. So that's the kind of thing you're doing right here. Is you're just kind of maxing out on just little tiny blending strokes and little tiny. So it looks like a little bit of light is just coming through there and just hitting those folds. And fabric is always one of my favorite things to paint. So. I mean, whether it's satin, it doesn't matter. Just clothes in general, folds like in sheets. For years, though, I would avoid anything with painting hands until I realized that I have to for a while, I just painted hands and just kept painting hands and hands, and finally clicked on me that hands are, the hard, you think it's hard until you just kind of practice enough and you realize don't sweat the details on it. In other words, hands in a painting aren't as predominant as the face. Like a lot of people be worried about like painting his hand right here, because they don't like painting hands, they don't like painting feet. But really, if you can paint the face like that, just don't work the hands as much. Especially with this type of painting, if you're doing phase painting, which is what this is, we do everything in phases and keep building up and finishing up, if I couldn't achieve the way this looks right now in just one sitting. It took, 8, 10 sittings to really get this the way I want it to look. And because it's dry between each coat, it really protects me because if I mess it up, I can just wipe it out and do it again. And the only real time I've never, you don't really mess up. I mean, you can, but I mean, you'd have to really dig in there and mess up. So you just trust that what you're doing is going to come out fine. Now here I'll take a little bit of this red glaze, a little bit of this glazing compound, add it to this red. Just this little bit of highlighted area. Right there too. And if I need to get a little redder, and you can take that big brush again and just brush it out. You can really just have a lot of fun, but I'm happy with this. I'm a lot happier with this now than I was before. So let's get a little bit more of that. And work a little bit more of this area. And then there's some areas where you see it hits that really white, so it gets that really nice light hit right there, which is like right here. And right there. So that one we want to blend in that white. And if it's too much, get a little red. Just do this. Too much, just take a little bit of that red. Red is tough because red, if you mess with the red and yellows and you add too much white to that red, you're going to get pink, and pink will kind of throw it off a little bit. So red takes a lot of, practice with the red, but red's the prettiest. But you can also take, if you just did this in red and white, if you just glaze it, if you paint it black and white and you do the grizzle and you glaze it red, black, touch the dark and black, 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 black. And then when it's all done, a little bit of white, red over glaze, you can get a satiny look. You don't have to do all the yellows and the stuff like that in there. So you can get a nice satin look. But this is where it comes out. It's kind of nice where it just comes out like this. I'm okay with that. Like I'm all right with that. I don't want to change anything right there. And let's see, we're gonna fix this little area right here too. Looks like there's, not really sure what it is, but almost like a black curtain. What we're working on now is we're going to take a look at we're going to do a little bit of work on the face and the hands right here. Not much. I just want to lighten it up a little bit. You know, and a little highlights in here, little highlights on the white, little highlight work on the hand. I'm still going to have to come back and work on that some more and some more down here. But we're going to do the same thing we're doing now. We're going to do the same thing we've been doing. I'm going to take a little bit of this flesh color. So I'm going to mix a little more flesh. Right here, a little brown, a little white, a little bit of red. White. And if we need a little red, we'll pull some right next to it right there. And go a little bit lighter for the highlights. It in, except I'm not going to glaze the whole face. I don't need to right now. It's pretty close to the colors I want. So basically what I'm going to do is kind of lighten it up a little bit. So just little tiny areas. What I don't want to do is make big changes right now. Just little tiny changes, and each step I'm just trying to prove it just a little bit. So I'm not thinking about what I have to do to finish it. I'm thinking about what I have to do to get it to the next step. And this is actually part of my favorite part of the painting right here, is getting and just this little bit of fine detail work. So now, if I just want to work a little bit of area, but I don't want to put a whole bunch of paint in there, I'll go find the whitest area like right here, and I'll add some paint in there, and I'll pull paint from there if I need it down here. That way I don't have to take a ton of paint from somewhere, or I don't have to put a big glob of paint. I got to figure out what to do with it. Now I can grab a bigger piece, a little bit more paint here because there's a nice white highlight right there. I'll drop a little bit right next to it. Take it, I put a little bit of my paper towel. Take the paint off the brush and just use that little tip and blend. And if you notice on this one, this color here is almost a little bit of an orangish brown. So we'll grab some of that little bit of orange in here. That in there. Work a little white into it. Dab a little white. Because you don't want it to be as red as underneath the cheekbones right down through here. Because that part of her face doesn't stick out. Plus, it goes down like here. And it's funny how just a subtle change and a little bit of details can really change the face. Just a little bit whiter in the nostril right here. Going down the bridge of the nose. Same thing here. And that same orangish color from here is right here. And now her face doesn't look so red up here, and that's what I was going for right here. And then there's a little bit of a bright spot right here, and brighter up here. A little better. Okay, so now if we have something that's a little, see how that's a little too red? So what we want to do is it's a little more of a brownish, a light brown. Really thin layer over top of it. Let some of that red shine through. A little black on the nostril. lip. Okay, I'm going to soften up a bit of yellow. Chin down here. Grayish color. That should do it. And when you're happy with it, just leave it. So right now I'm pretty happy. I just want to get a little bit more white on the cheek right here. Make sure my grays or my lines are right through here. And now, if you were to go back and you were to look at this in the beginning videos, you'll see it was never even close to this. So it's that's why it just takes time through progression to be able to get it to start to look like the painting. So let's take a look at the hands. The hands are just, when I get to this part and I'm this far along, all I really care most about right now is getting the highlights, so really the lightest part of the hands, and just kind of blending them in. So it actually means I'm not really doing a lot. I'm just kind of dabbing wherever the lightest part of the painting is. Here. And then there's actually some white. Look right here. And then we get a little bit of this grayish. And that's it. We're not going to do much more to it, except add a little bit of the red. I'm going to take it all right now and just kind of blend it out a little bit with a little bit of that black on the bottom. Okay, I want to thank you for watching. On the next video, we're going to touch up around through here, finish up these curtains, and we're pretty close to wrapping this up. Again, my name's George at paintreproductions.com, and again, thank you for watching.